Joining me is my co-host, that guy at the end of the bar. Do you know him as Troy Pacelli, the love of my life? How you doing tonight, sweetie? And what are you sipping on?
I'm doing good. Thanks for asking. So glad we are almost through another one. Looking very forward to the weekend.
Oh, tell me about it.
And I'm drinking a Cherry Coke Zero.
Yeah, I've got a different type of seltzer water today. This one's a blood orange lemonade. And it's funny because I don't really taste orange or lemonade. I just taste water.
There you go.
And of course, joining us tonight, our special guest, Lester San Jose, the Sceptic Tank. How you doing, sweetie? And what are you sipping on?
I'm doing all right. Can't complain. I was sipping on Mexican Coca-Cola. At least that's how it's described in the menu.
That's the good stuff.
Yep.
Cool.
Good.
I see we've got a full
We
chat.
really do. You got a
Nice.
lot of people to say hi to.
Yes. And before we get started, I want to make sure I say hello to each and every one of them.
Yep.
So starting off, I don't know why my headset sounds really low to me. If y'all are having trouble hearing me, let me know because my headset seems really low to me. And I don't know why because it normally doesn't.
Hmm.
But first I want to say hello to Big Al. Have a great show tonight, my friends. Of course we will. We have a great show every night.
Yep.
I also want to say hello to Lady Miss, saying good evening with her pretty hearts and flowers. And Connie Clary, hello everyone. There's that last call guy, saying hi to everybody. Mr. Londell's Groovy Movie. Greetings and felicitations. Hip hip rock, Talia. Let's see, who else do we have here? Connie Cleary saying hello to Mr. Lundell's Groovy Movies. And then, of course, me saying hello to love of my life. Because reasons. There's deleted scenes, everybody's favorite Blue Wrench. Probably the hardest working Blue Wrench. Evelyn Hampton, good evening everyone. She's sipping on green tea with a few drops of vanilla extract in it. That actually sounds really good.
It does.
Yeah.
And we have Serenity. Hello, Netter and all. Budweiser is their poison. Cool.
Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. Final Fantasy Fan 12. Hello. Which makes me think of Mrs. Doubtfire. Hello.
Yeah.
And I think that's everybody
think
that's
that
in the
catches
chat right
us
now.
up. Yeah.
Thank you all for joining us tonight as we talk to our special guest, Lester San Jose, the Sceptic Tank. Now, I have to ask, Sceptic Tank? Tell us more
Yeah,
about that.
how did that come about?
Do you guys remember that 1996 movie, The Rock?
Sure.
The
Sean Connery, right?
the dialogue in the prison cell.
It's
I
been a
don't
while.
remember, yeah.
So basically, he's asking Mason how he was running through his explanation, I think septic tank was one of those areas he had tapped into.
Uh-huh.
And the punchline, of course, is that's all good and well, but how did you get out of your cell? But that was the skeptic tank was something I mulled over for a while. I mean, I've
Uh-huh.
had blogs in the past,
Uh-huh.
but reflecting on what I've been living through is just throughout my 42 years of life, at least 36 of them or 30 some odd of them, answering various questions and lots of wisdom in those 36 years and how to reconcile them. So I'm swimming in the waters of various what you might call orthodoxies,
Mm-hmm.
wherever you get them work, life, friends, hobbies. Yeah. Uh, but at least where I come from, it's not namby pamby. I don't think it is.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of my anchor is what I learned during my 5 years of studying Bruce Lee's martial art.
Oh,
That was,
nice.
and the way it was taught to me, because if you it take like Taekwondo, at least in America,
Mm-hmm.
they have a very formulaic way of teaching it, at least the way it's presented to kids.
Right.
So anybody can go to school A, B, C. You might have a variation among schools, maybe a hair or two, maybe more than that, but it's different. But they're more or less the same. It's not too different where you can't exactly go through a transition of sorts. Like, oh, I got to relearn this, I got to relearn that. Um, and I don't know if Troy or you have been exposed to a lot of what has been presented about Bruce Lee, whether by the books or the press or movies, even documentaries. And so, what made my upbringing a little distinct is that um, growing up, I chased the thing for 10 years, and I was wrestling as Jeet Kune Do, the name he gave the art. Is it merely a nebulous concept or a set of concepts? And
Right.
in my time, being exposed to what they were terming original Jeet Kune Do, it's it's part of it. Concepts and principles are part of it. That's all good and well, but the way it was presented to me was that you didn't want to be too dogmatic about it at the same time. Because if you're so uptight about a given principle, for example, the use of strong side, using like a fencer, because that's going back to this idea, is it a nebulous concept?
Mm-hmm.
It's not. It contains movements, very specific ones, a very specific way to stand. So, taken from fencing, we use our strongest side forward. But it's very easy to take that principle, just one of many, and you can dogmatize it to a point where if you see in the body movement that there's a violation, you kind of miss out. So that's growing through in that community that I was part of, the way it was presented through that specific group, it allowed me to retain an anchor, but at the same time, it gave me a degree of flexibility. So as I was training this, studying this, and kind of traveling around the states or around the greater LA area, um, I ran into some things as I was wrapping up undergrad, and it kind of set me on a path of putting things into question. Not to
Mm-hmm.
mention that these self discoveries in my childhood, like how I was a twin, it took
Oh.
it took a hearsay from an aunt. Oh, did you know you have a twin brother? I'm like, no, no one told me. I didn't really realize it until maybe I was 6, 7, or 8. Whenever I first came in contact with the Thanks Mom, the pink colored photo album saying my brother and my name. Thank you. But
Wow.
that kind of I think that's when the seed was planted. But as I got older, and especially growing up in a technically an immigrant household, and I technically am an immigrant, even though I came in at the age of 1,
Mm-hmm.
being a, they say no country for old men. I
Yeah.
guess you could say there was no country for this old man
Wow.
because I was wrestling with this idea of, yeah, I grew up saying the Pledge of Allegiance, and then, my family trying to wrestle with this Philippine allegiance.
Yeah.
But I was not legal, I was not illegal, I was in limbo. So
Mm-hmm.
just that whole wrestling, the seed was planted there. But growing up in that kind of background where uh, you're expected to live up to certain expectations, like where you would go to school, what you would study. And I don't know if my mom envisioned this, but she wanted all of us to be in some sort of statistical, mathematical uh, profession, whether we're talking accounting, engineering, fill in the blank, anything involving math. Yet they exposed us to all sorts of artsy stuff, especially music.
Sure.
And she turned out with 4 children. One's a graphics artist for Hollywood, the other a musician, the other was in fashion, and I have an English degree. And so the most of my adult life getting out of undergrad was fighting the question of, what are you going to do with your English degree?
Right.
Teach? And I go, wait a minute, I thought I was the one to answer that question.
Yeah.
So that's that's been pretty much the way I live my life, is that I I trust, but I verify. You know, I don't mind a trusted voice, but I have to test it. Like I think Tony, you might have been attuned to Retro Blasting's some of his videos. I try
Yeah.
to catch up, but he mentioned something putting things. I forgot the exact phrasing he used, but it was like putting things to the test. You know, stress testing or something like that. Putting it through a stress test,
Yeah.
and it's been interesting. It's been an interesting ride to say the least. In that I was supposed to be an engineer. I started out as an engineering major, but I I didn't know what to do with my love of arguing with people online. but
Yeah.
but that's been pretty much how to reconcile stuff is the other thing that I've had to, wrestle with growing up. And then this idea that, well, you had all this background in math and engineering and technology, and I was supposed to be some computer repair dude because I had a certificate in it. I had a couple of certificates in what you might call I don't know if vocational schools are the correct term, but I think that's a term I heard back in the '90s. Vocational school. I find that hilarious,
Hmm.
on some level. That why would you call that vocational school, so to speak, like going into trades? But I had that background, so guess I had that going for me.
Sure.
And so wherever I went, it was a matter of, okay, I have these skills from my last life. Well, how do I translate these things that I had no matter where I've gone ever since I started really working, and especially when I know that whatever I obtain is being taxed. Now I know I'm in the working class.
Yeah.
it's not like
Right.
it's not like washing cars or washing shoes for pocket chains.
Right.
Yeah, but
Right.
anyway,
But they
yeah,
find out about that, they'll tax that too. I mean, my gosh, now they're coming after us for $60 on eBay sales and whatnot. For crying out loud, we have no idea where the money goes that they're sending to Ukraine. But heaven forbid, you sell an action figure online. Uncle Sam's got to get his piece of that. I guess to send to Ukraine.
yeah,
But
yeah,
be that as it may, I want to go back to something that you said that kind of piqued my interest. You were talking about Jeet Kune Do, which I don't know a great deal about it, but
sure,
I know the concept of it being very much adaptability, on your feet, and not being dogmatic, but being practical applications, decisions in the moment, and so forth. And it made me think a lot about a conversation I was having very recently uh, with someone talking about, the dichotomy of, education, book learning, philosophy, right,
okay,
and hands-on practical training. So, for example, learning, you know, if you go and get an engineering degree, right? You're going to go
yeah.
and you're going to read a whole bunch of books. You're going to learn a whole bunch of mathematics, and you know, I don't know. Maybe you.
The the one thing I appreciated in my computer repair days anyway,
Mm-hmm.
and I think to some degree my engineering technician. So I don't know if I told you guys a story or anybody. Um, my first assignment in engineering technician was write me an instruction set on how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich.
Yeah, I've seen that
And
exercise.
it's I know people like to swing into that dichotomy, and that's what I tend to wrestle with, that
Yeah,
these things are held in tension, and it's very easy to take the tension in an adversarial direction on one side or the other.
sure.
Um, Going back to Jeet Kune Do, well, I'm going to try to marry the two in a way that
Mm-hmm.
when I did the engineering stuff, is that yeah, we had lecture time, but we had lab time, so hands-on work. You had the lecture one day, and then you had the lab work the other day. So we would go in and plan a lot of hypothetical things. One of them being you're going to plan a cross-town trip or a statewide trip, and you had these conditions working against you.
Yeah.
So you had that, and then also on top of the peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and that was a trip watching the results because the
Yeah.
teacher would just play dumb,
Right.
and 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 that was pretty much the inspiration for our model airplane project, which was basically we built these sky, I don't know if you heard of them. They were around in the 90s called sky bunnies, but these were model airplanes that you put together and you would experience putting the thing together, and you
Huh.
had to write the instructions as if you're writing to an 8-year-old, which
Sure.
goes back to the peanut butter and jelly
Yeah.
experiment. Going back to JKD, what people, and this is in the literature, and
Uh-huh.
there's a lot more literature out there, is that, and especially with certain things within the history of Bruce Lee and the art of JKD, how it was kind of widely proliferated in the 80s, and that's where my 90s or my confusion lies. Is, well, is it something nebulous, or are they merely principles? But if you were to train under the lineage I had trained for roughly 5 years,
Mm-hmm.
uh, you would know that the question's going to be answered in the fact we have three primary stances, which discuss the ranges.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, long, medium, and close, and then you had five punches and three kicks.
Mm-hmm.
And you're thinking, well, how is this a lifetime thing? But then it was something that was impressed upon me early on, was if you spent 3 years training this dedicatedly, you would pretty much get the entire curriculum.
Mm-hmm.
The rest, as my friend said, decade or two later, because he was my instructor, and he said, my goal every Sunday for you guys was uh, head knowledge, or head knowledge is the goal, and the second phrase is the key, is performance is the path. And so we would learn how to use these punches and kicks and work in them principles.
Sure.
So longest weapon to nearest target is another one. Um, Body alignment, hip and shoulder alignment was another one. Working with this concept of beats, the ways of attack, and and it would kind of bug me because I had a contact based in the Philippines who was studying the same material, and he just wanted me to say what drills we were doing. But
Yeah.
something about, and this is why, depending on where you go for, like, say, Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, and the credit to that is they kept their standards pretty high.
Mm-hmm.
But I think depending on the teacher, they can help you unlock certain things mentally. Because one of his buddies, this friend who taught me JKD, was uh, talking about this mentality that if you're not training principles, you're not training Jeet Kune Do. So my training has been more principle based because um, you just think about the principle, and the form that you express that principle will be dictated by that and what your end goal is. So the idea that you learn these different ways of attack and you apply that in a sparring context, and that will kind of be your lab work, which kind of goes back to my brother, who actually is a musician, and he was double majoring in physics and music. And so, of course, as I said about my mother and her wants for her kids, you can imagine her heart sinking when he told her, "Mom, I'm dropping physics. I'm
Mm.
just doing music." And especially on the heels of his wedding day, he announces, "Well, I'm not teaching at the school district anymore. I'm going to be a musician."
Yeah.
So talk about a double whammy.
I would
Oh,
imagine.
No, well, I mean, he's doing well for himself. It's because he realized he had a lot of demand for stuff on the side, like gigs and teaching appointments, people flying him all over the country so he can teach people how to play the ukulele. But
Wow.
the number one thing he told me was when he went to California, Berkeley,
Mm-hmm.
which back in the 90s was one of the powerhouses, just like Stanford. I don't know if the rankings are the same, but Stanford and Cal were the two names in California. But the knock on the UC schools, they were all theory. And having gone through the CSU system, I kind of saw what they meant, because at least when I was on that engineering track, we would do we would do lab work, not just lecture. We
Yeah.
would play with AutoCAD. And my sister kind of had some envy because Stanford at the time was using SolidWorks, not something industry standard. I mean, SolidWorks has its perks, or it probably has some advantages AutoCAD doesn't have. But it's this idea that, especially when I started going to Cal Poly Pomona back in 2000, and their mantra, both Pomona and um, San Luis Obispo, learn by doing. And that's been kind of like the mode that I've been operating under for most of my life. Like my mom's only memory of me and toys was I'd break them, but
Yeah.
I would know how to put them back together at the very least. Maybe not within a quick amount of time, but I'll figure it out.
Yeah, well, I figure if I can't figure it out, I'll just watch a toy Poloy video and
Yeah.
kind of follow him a little bit.
Yeah.
So, no, I appreciate what you said because I just think about, the martial art training that I had. I think, just about every martial art, although their philosophies may be different, their methods of teaching are always different. There's one element you often see, and it's the katas, right? You keep practicing over and over again, the same movements over and over again.
Right.
Some of them increasing in complexity, others focusing on less complexity, more exactness. Why is that? If I just studied how to throw a punch by reading a book, well, that's fine. But there's something called muscle memory.
Right.
Your body has to remember how to do that without thinking. And
Exactly.
and once you have the forms down, you have to engage both the mind and the body in decision making, in the moment. But you can't do that effectively if the muscle memory isn't there, and you got to think it through. It's almost like the peanut butter and jelly exercise all over
Right.
again, right?
Right.
As opposed to, well, I know how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. I'm just going to make one. You know
Right.
what I'm saying? The other thing that I've always found when it comes to, because I've been on the teaching end, obviously I've been on the learning end too.
Right.
Something I've heard people say, and I found it to be very, very true, is that
All right.
different people seem to learn differently because everybody's different, and a lot of people think differently. I guess there are some people that can literally read a book and then go, okay, and then go and put it into practice. I don't know many people like that. I know some people that learn very little from reading, but they if they were going to learn how to make that peanut butter and jelly sandwich, don't give them a list of instructions and ingredients. Go ahead and just do it. You don't even have to
Right.
say a word. Let them watch you.
Right.
And they watch you, and then when they're done, okay, now I'm going to try to do it. Everybody seems to be different, but ultimately you can't truly learn something until you do it yourself, and you certainly can't demonstrate that you know something.
Right. And I think it's funny, and I will say this, and this is one thing that I'm trying to do with my channel, but as I read in a Bruce Lee magazine issue one day, I didn't know that what I was doing or what I was practicing would lead me to this. So I had some thoughts about what I would do as my first video. And my brother, being a YouTuber himself, his channel's called Ukulele, by the way, and
Okay.
and he just said, just put something up there. What's
Yeah.
your biggest fear? And I'm like, okay. And then because I knew I wanted to put questions out there.
Yeah.
But one thing, going back to the remark about a buddy asking me, "What did you guys drill on?" And there was something that my friend explained to me that people will look at movements we drill and will not look beyond,
Yeah.
because um, there are certain movements that we do train, and the one thing that, and going back to this idea that you can go to any place and you learn the same stuff, but it's not going to be presented the same way.
Right.
Um, and so, what my friend raised awareness of is like definitions. Like when people hear jab and cross,
Yeah.
you wouldn't think that those are techniques and not tools, or what a tool is versus what a technique is. A tool Let me see if I can. Let me turn my camera on. I don't
Sure.
know. I don't want to punch the camera out, but this is
No,
a
yeah, that would be bad.
this is a tool. We have a thing called a straight punch.
Okay, I'm not seeing you. I'm seeing
Yeah, I
a
just
Oh,
see
black
a
you're
black
screen.
not.
screen.
No, yeah, I'm seeing a black screen right
Oh,
now.
you are.
Yeah.
Oh, let me see. A black screen.
Yeah.
Where's my?
Yeah. What try going into the settings down
Yeah.
below and go to the video and make sure that it's seeing your camera.
It shows me that my camera is there. Let me see. Oh, let me try it to top. Do you guys see it now or no? Okay.
No,
Well,
not
I'm
yet.
gonna.
Sorry.
Um, no worries, no worries. Let me.
Technical difficulties, folks.
Yeah, yeah. But basically, just think of like a standard straight punch, which goes from your, in a ready position, you put your hand out.
Right.
Now, depending on how that's used, that's the technique side of it.
Right.
Whether I can make it like a jab, which is basically a probe,
Yep.
and I laugh every time I hear a commentator in a UFC fight. Oh, look at that cross. Well, a cross is a technique which conveys a straight punch crossing over someone's jab.
Right.
So we made that distinction, whereas most places will not. And that's
Yeah.
what trip that. But the idea that we have certain movements that we do that that takes it from a tool to being a technique, and then when we drill certain movements, um, we're trying to teach a lesson about counterattacking.
Sure.
So if you so every time that we would have someone throw a punch and they would fade their head back, but that would involve in a live drilling context that would be something where you have to learn how to time it. Otherwise, like going back to the katas, as a karate practitioner of a housemate I had at one point in time in my life,
Hmm.
he would explain that there's a timing to it.
Yep.
And if you wanted a good nerd out on kata, check out a guy named Jesse. He called himself the karate nerd, and
Okay.
he actually goes into to the to the reason why the katas were developed, and he explains the applicability of each of those katas.
Sure.
And there's a specific term used in that world. It's called bunkai or application, because the way the karate was starting to become standardized, if you follow his stuff, he goes into the history of when karate started in Okinawa, and they tried to bring that stuff to the mainland, which then made it more standardized, and it kind of changed the focus.
Right.
Um, and the same thing when it came to, you could say the same thing happened within JKD because again, that dichotomy of extremes of like adaptability. Some people even say, "Oh, you make up your own style." Yes and no. I can use a lot of what I've learned in JKD, but because of what I'm focusing on now, and I'll use my endeavors in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, I can learn how to do a hip escape. I can do certain chokes. I can do certain things, but I'm trying to put it in the realm of the proper context. Because that if there's one thing I've learned in my development is it's all good and well, and I'm still doing this stuff within my adult age. Because I know for many people, when they go through martial arts, they go through it as a kid and then they stop,
Yeah.
right?
That's
But
true.
if for people who are probably in their 20s, excuse me, in their 20s, and they still do this, and they know how to throw a punch, they know how to do X, Y, or Z movements. But as you get older and you realize, okay, at at some point you'll realize that you are kind of a registered quote weapon, which goes into, and I think you're along the same lines, Troy, and
Hmm.
I'm maybe netter, that as I go and as I talk about the idea of tools, a question that was put out by the late James Yeager, his channel's James Yeager, or Tactical Response, is that the question asked was, are you the weapon or are you the tool?
Mm.
Oh, good question.
Yeah.
Because as I got older and I'm hearing anecdotes that if you're still going to do this and you really want to make it work and you're studying like jujitsu or Muay Thai a lot, that you have to consider the law. I hate to say it, but short of your own, they talk about, I'd rather be judged by 12 than carried by 6.
Exactly.
Are
Exactly.
you are you sure you want that?
Yeah.
Because because in my recent training experiences, and you might have seen my short, Troy or Netter, on my time in the team room, and I was in a weekend class on use of force,
Hmm.
and I realized there are a lot more things at work, because the prosecutor is going to be out to get you. Like, part of the final exam is handling questioning and knowing how to control what you can control, and
Right.
knowing, like, where you're more likely not to use, especially when we talk about two-way, you're not likely to use your pew pew.
Right.
You're more likely, and the one thing so when we talk about self-defense, being a martial artist in Jeet Kune Do, to kind of reconcile that, we have this notion of, we attack on preparation or intent, and
Hmm.
or during, that's counter, and then on repost, which is, I think, borrowed from fencing, or when the attack is retracted, or retraction. So
Hmm.
before, during, and after. So based on the paradigm that I've adopted since, oh, 2010, 2009,
Hmm.
um, the idea of what happens before, which is, in a day-to-day context, we're talking about verbalizing or managing unknown contacts.
Hmm.
So that, so then, okay, it, if you cannot verbally judo your way out of a situation, and you have no choice but to respond, it's like there's a playlist you run in your head on how to handle strangers,
Hmm.
and you have to at some point realize, okay, you've given yourself permission to defend yourself if you have no choice. But the legal aspect is also, you have to have certain levels of reason, that you have to find yourself reasonably in danger of harm to yourself or another party.
Right.
And so that's where the focus of my training has been. So when it comes to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, all the cool moves you might either see in the UFC or in a everyday Jiu-Jitsu class,
Yeah.
there's a good percentage of that stuff I will not use in a day-to-day encounter.
Right.
Not that that
Because
stuff is, yeah, go ahead.
it comes down to, are you doing it to put on a show, or are you doing it because this is serious time and I'm just trying to end this situation? I don't
Right.
care what it looks like. I want to
Well,
walk
the
away from this at the end.
well, let's take a practical thing about holds. Troy or Ned, or I'm pretty sure you've seen high school wrestling, or Troy, you might have been on a
I
wrestling team.
was
I don't.
I did a lot of high school wrestling, sure. Hmm.
Okay, so you think about the common head and arm tie.
Yep.
That's all good in a wrestling ring, but when weapons are involved, when tools on your person are involved, that hold is very impractical.
Right.
It's not, because you're give the one thing I learned from another instructor out in Orange County is
Hmm.
that you want to have sight on the hands. So you want to know where the other person's hands are going, because it's going to be a fight for the other's weapon. So you're either going to try to retain access to your tools, and you're preventing access for him or her from her tools. So in Netter's case, it's like, well, I gotta find a way to regain control. And
Hmm.
so it's a different focus than what I had learned in JKD, which is predominantly a striking art with some grappling in between.
Right.
But that was Bruce's 1970s thinking. He didn't live into the 80s or 90s, where we do rehearse and train for those, commonly. And I don't know if you're one, Troy, for FBI videos, but a lot of these training schools are now looking at FBI videos of commonly ways of attacking people. You
Hmm.
know, that kind of, like, what is the most probable thing to happen, and that's what I had come to terms with what I had done in JKD, which is more ring based, you know, despite the irony in Bruce saying, "Oh no, we do stuff for the street." But if people looked at how JKD is trained nowadays, they're trained like boxers, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's
Hmm.
just that the skills you learn, and I'm gonna try to tie it to the jujitsu example, the skills that you learn may or not apply to a weapons-based environment, if that makes sense. Am I
Well,
making sense so far?
no, absolutely. The analogy that I always used to draw is if you've ever taken a fencing class, and I mean like European fencing with the foil, right?
Yeah.
That is a skill. It is a sport. You score points,
Right.
right?
Right.
But that is not a method I would use to defend myself in the streets. You know, I
No.
mean,
No.
that is not very practical. And I
Right.
feel that almost every form of martial arts, whether it's boxing, jeet kune do, taekwondo, anything, right?
Right. Right.
There is what you do when it's a sport in a ring that may or may not tie directly to what you would do if, because I'll tell you something, if your life is on the line, I'm not really concerned about the hitbox and the points, and
No. Yeah.
I am looking at ending this combat as quickly as possible and walking
Right.
away from it.
And then I do a bad job of this if I'm on a panel. I'm trying to look at the comments, and you already pointed out for Mark, and that's the other thing. It's a legal thing as well.
Yes, you do have
That's
to take
the
that into account.
yeah.
You
That's
did
another.
say better to be judged by 12 than carried by 6, but I would counter that with better to neither, right?
Right. Right.
Better
Well,
to
that's
defend yourself, be alive, and not have to defend yourself in
so
court because it's a very clear case and you followed the law.
yeah. So a lot of what I've learned in the last number of months, because the one thing I appreciate about Jaeger's school is, yeah, they focus on the pew pew training, but the other side of it, and one of his daughters is a medical professional, is you're likely going to need and use medical skill in the right context. Like the one thing I'm working on is putting on my stuff by using uh, body feel.
Yeah.
And that's something I'm trying to be attuned to, whether that's putting on my belt and putting the stuff on the belt, or put it on my person without looking, because again, the skills and what realm you're playing in. I took a weekend class in emergency medical, and that's a trip that um, that even though you're not going to be to the level of adrenaline if you're actually in a gunfight of sorts,
Hmm.
like, but you're still going to have adrenaline because you gotta. The one thing that we all struggled with as a class
Hmm.
was putting on our gloves with our heads up.
Yeah.
It's not like, oh, we're gonna learn how to put on a tourniquet, and it's not like you're gonna be able to casually put a tourniquet on.
Yeah.
You gotta be able to do it because one of the quotes in the material is, uh, and I know this may scandalize some ears, but I agree with it. Deadly accurate aim is medical care.
Well, true. One thing that we were talking about, philosophy versus practicality. Anybody who's taken any kind of tactical training
Yeah.
knows this. You hear a lot of keyboard warriors that have all kinds of comments to make when you see a video of. There was one that was going around about guy comes in with a gun, swinging it around in a restaurant. Guy in the restaurant very slowly, without being seen, reaches for his pew pew, pulls it out, boom, 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 empties the clip right into the guy. Right?
Right.
Everybody starts commenting. It only takes one bullet to kill somebody. That's overkill. Blah, 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 blah.
Yep, you make sure
No.
they're down and they stay
Yeah,
down.
exactly. Well,
Well, the
philosophy aside, anyone who's done tactical training will tell you, when you're actually in that situation, even when it's not truly life and death, it's a practice, right? It's a, they give you the opportunity to be in a restaurant that's being robbed, and you react, and it's not life and death, but the muscle memory kind of thing, right?
right. Well, you
and
want
and
to
and you're
go ahead.
firing blanks, And the instructor then comes and says, "How many shots did you fire?" "I fired 3 shots."
Yeah.
"Okay, check."
Right.
"Oh wow, I fired 6 shots."
Well,
Why?
the
Because
right.
because adrenaline, right?
Yes. Well, that's the other thing too. If you ever came across it, I think I posted it on some of my other videos, but
Mm-hmm.
the book Four Pillars of Fighting by the late James Zager, um, he goes into a good section of the book talking about the realities of what happens post gunfight. And that's the other thing that you'll wrestle with.
Right.
God forbid I run into that, but you talk about adrenaline and he spells it out in I think in clear language. I don't think it's overly scientific. But he explains like what adrenaline will do, and one of these is audio exclusion. When I
Yep.
did my force on force class, it was just I didn't realize how much of that was happening to me.
Yep.
It took about 6 evolutions or 6 scenarios in to realize, yeah, let's not go to an ATM. Let's avoid it if we can, at all costs. As my
Yep.
instructor would say, is like avoid the ATMs, guys, because they got AIDS. And but the thing too is like the stressors, whether we're talking play, and this is why I think scenario training gets downplayed too much, is that yeah, you don't want to take it too seriously, but you need to take it seriously enough, and you have to be a good role player. But I think for myself that my adrenaline was heightened as soon as I heard the shout, "Give me your money." It's not like, "Hey, give me your money," but
Yeah.
no, they go, "Hey, give me your money," or you're in a conversation with your scenario friend, and you
Mm-hmm.
lose the cues verbally. The one of the biggest lessons I learned was that I wasn't as loving to my brother as I thought I was. One scenario, I let the guy take my brother into the car, and then I took care of that situation. Or if I didn't heed the verbal cues, there was one verbal cue that I should have said. I should have taken the over on him being good on that verbal threat.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, there are times when you just got to realize, no, don't need. This is not the hill for me to die on, so to speak.
Yeah. The thing I've always said, when taught when, again the keyboard warrior philosophers come
Right,
out about self defense and blah 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 blah. I
right,
I always bring up, you know what, Han Solo did nothing wrong. As soon as Greedo said, as soon as he said over my dead body, and Greedo said, "That's the idea." Well, that's a
oh yeah,
threat. That was him
yeah,
telling him, "I'm taking you in dead."
yeah, yeah,
Okay, well, all bets off. I'm firing first. And as it turns out, he shot only.
right,
Yes,
right,
that's the hill I'll die on philosophically.
right. It's
And speaking
yeah,
of philosophy, though, I did want to kind of pivot. We're
sure,
actually 3/4 of the way into the show, and
yeah,
I wanted to bring it back to philosophy a little bit. Just saw your last video, and I did recommend everyone go check it out. It's not. I mean, you clearly have a great heart for the martial arts. You do a lot of great practice. You also have a spiritual side too, right? That seems to be part and parcel of your philosophy. Did you want to talk about that
right.
maybe a little
Well,
bit?
that's the biggest reconciliation project of my life. Is
Mm-hmm.
that martial arts I owe a lot to. Even in my job life, I owe a lot to.
Sure.
It's like, like whether I wanted to admit it at the time, but I think God has had my back, even though I've turned on my back on Him a couple of times. I joined a Buddhist sect. I don't know if I regret doing it, but it gave me some wisdom. But no matter what I was doing, I think God had my back, and so the biggest reconciliation project of my life is, can I still reconcile the martial life that I've taken on? Not that I'm some military junkie, train 6 hours a day, hardcore, but it's just this idea that that and there's a book I would recommend if you have time. It's called
Mm-hmm.
The Life Giving Sword, and so
Hmm.
that's where I'm inspired by um, within my martial pursuits.
Mm-hmm.
Is that I because it's a total package. If I'm a martial artist, I need to be able to. And I think I got it from one of Richard Marcinko's um, people he used in the Real Team. It's a short book by Richard Marcinko, maker of SEAL Team 6,
Mm-hmm.
and his philosophy on business and leadership. And so there's one guy, I think his name was Al Tremblay, or they called him Doc, because he was a medic, but he also said, as much as it was good to know how to take a life, but you know how to save it.
Yep.
So it's that idea that, and even my godmother asked me, he was like, "How do you reconcile?" Well, there are things that you can learn,
Mm-hmm.
and so going back to, because I told a few times on some of my videos that there are other Christian based channels out there if that's more of your jam. I'm just going to put in where I think it fits.
Yeah.
So I don't try to go over the theological mumbo jumbo, although I still think about the time some Mormons showed up to my door and I kind of shot them down with certain points I knew from
Sure.
scripture.
Sure.
But it's like, um, if you want that conversation, reach out, and I want to make sure it's genuine because I know that can
Right.
go various places. But I look at a lot of what I learned in martial art that um, there's a sense of synchronicity, a sense of timing, a sense of being and presence that I learned that early on within my ventures into the church tradition I've become a part of, the what you might call the Eastern Orthodox tradition or Eastern Christian tradition, where
Mm-hmm.
a lot of it is still learned by doing,
Mm-hmm.
but it's all the stuff that I wrestled with during my time. And I that last video you posted was just my reflection on what happened during a service.
Yep.
Not that we're trying to put on a show. And
Right.
I try to make it clear that, people will sniff it out easily if you're trying to put on a show, if you
Yeah.
will.
Yeah.
And so that's been my journey, is that no matter what happens to me, whether it was a layoff, two layoffs within the same company, and wrestling with that, and coming to terms that I don't need to have all the answers, and I don't need to have everything given to me by God. God will give it to me when I need it, when He says I need it, not when I believe I need it. And so wrestling the two paths, and just like officially on the books, according to my diocesan bishop, that anyone who's caught with a pew pew in the church will be excommunicated. And I'm like, okay, good to know. And it's something that I have to weigh.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I'm thinking of, okay, if I can't do it because I'm in a certain standing within my parish that I do certain things, and I'm not a church man yet. And
Mm-hmm.
if that happens to be the case, whether in the minor ranks or the major ranks, which are presbyter, bishop, deacon, those are the major orders, and then we have minor ranks, reader, and so forth. Two main minor ranks. So at some point, I may be ranked within the orders, more likely the minor than the major. Thank God. But the idea is that I have this weight on my shoulder, and if I can't carry that, I can at least teach people. And that's the other thing I've had to wrestle with a lot of my life, knowing that part of my self discovery is knowing that I have this affliction, whether I was born with it or I had contracted it somehow. But looking
Mm-hmm.
at my cousin who's endured I don't know if it's full blown. I'll say it. It's probably full blown cerebral palsy, whereas mine,
Mm-hmm.
I still, it's minor according to it's mild according to what was diagnosed at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So people can look at me and say, "Well, I don't see. He looks like a functional human being." Thank you. And,
Yeah.
but my mom had these fears, and so that kind of that's been the sum of my life. Just realizing like what's my place, especially knowing how my brother died when he was just 3 months old when he passed away.
Mm.
And knowing that my mom said, well, your brother was the stronger between the two at the time, and then
Yeah.
somehow I'm still here. So imagine a guy 8 years old trying to wrestle with that reality, knowing
Yeah.
that you also have a brother that would come 6 years after I was born, and how do
Yeah.
I wrestle with that? And heaven forbid for the modern audiences or the younger audience sharing a room with that sibling.
Yeah.
you know, I kind of overheard it with my two sisters. Of course, they had their sisterly squabbles, and especially when they were pretty much right next to you. It was just the hallway that separated our rooms at the time.
Right.
And and they would probably hear us, our squabbles. So wrestling, all that, and that it's very easy to say, well, the hell with it. And I always tell people, I joke about, I've done my thing. My bucket list isn't it's not very fancy. It's very short. I've done what I needed to do.
Hmm.
And I half joke about, hey, I'm ready, Lord. Whenever you want to take me, take me.
Hmm.
But every time I wake up, it's like, well, you put
Not
me here.
done yet. Yeah.
What do you need me to do?
Exactly. Exactly.
So,
I
oh,
see that Maria with Tiantelli's in the house. Definitely think you guys would get along famously. She's a very spiritual person herself. She's a Zen
right.
priestess, in fact.
Yeah, I think I saw that interview. Forget when I caught it, but
Yeah.
I did watch it. Yeah, I
But
might have to go ahead.
I did want to get across though that your channel is kind of a slice of life. It's about it's a little philosophy. It's a little bit of religion. It's a little bit of gaming. It's pop culture. Because let's face it, all that kind of stuff is part of a person's life, right?
Well, yeah, real quickly about the Slackware bit. I didn't think I would do the amount I would do on my version of Linux that I've been running. It's not I
Yeah,
didn't make it, but it's the oldest available distribution. Everyone knows about Ubuntu. And so I know that there are some Slackware users who feel kind of out of the woodwork. They feel left behind because every file you download, like, oh, you're a Linux user? Here's a file for you Linux users. Oh, but it's only for Red Hat and Ubuntu. Really,
yeah,
people?
yeah,
But basically, it's been a series of answering various questions that I didn't think I would have to answer. And so that's where it took initially, uh, outside of the initial videos I posted about my brother and I trying to do karaoke on stage. So
right. There you go.
I think you might have seen me try to do the police's, I think it was message in a bottle. Yeah, message in a
Message
bottle.
in a bottle. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Yeah. So I really do recommend. In fact, let me drop that link one
sure.
more time. That's go make sure those, especially those of you that just got here, make sure that you're subscribed to Lester San Jose, the Skeptic Tank. You see him in all the chats. He's an incredible supporter. Let's try to support him and support each other too. Make sure you're subscribing to all of each other's uh, uh, pages. I mean, I got the blue wrenches here, dropping those links like
Yeah.
crazy. Honor the work that they do by subscribing to each other, and you know, as PJ says, together we grow. So Lester, what have you got coming up in the near future that you
Well,
see?
I was that retrospective you saw me drop. I meant
Mm-hmm.
to do it sooner. Like I
Yeah.
said, I meant to do it sooner because it was off the heels of talking about putting on a quote show, putting on a
Right.
show, and
Yeah. Yeah.
I was trying to tie it into how pop culture and the church can learn from each other. Just like I said about the church gathering and council, what pop culture can learn from that. It's going to
Right.
be ugly. It's going to be messy because not every Star Wars fan thinks the same way, and it'll be interesting to see how that's hashed out if ever something like that was done.
Yeah.
Um, but what I have in the cards right now is a lengthy homework assignment. Probably not quite Retro Blasting's
That 4 hour deep
not
dive on.
quite not quite that. It's just a matter if there's any support I ask for, it's just send your good vibes and juju while I try
Yeah.
to endure. I finished the first and second albums of Taylor Swift. I have however many albums I have left to go
Uh,
because I take on the question of eras. That her thing is
yeah.
called the Eras Tour, right?
Sure.
And I'm thinking, I've been around pop music. I
Right.
was even thinking about dubbing myself the pop curmudgeon, but there might be someone more curmudgeonly than I am.
Yeah.
But I've been around pop music. Not that I'm like the biggest Britney fan or the biggest Debbie Gibson fan, but I will throw massive respect. And so that's what I did. Like, retro blasting got me onto Kylie Minogue, but growing up, I listened to the tracks. I didn't know who the artists were until however much time after the fact.
Yeah.
Like, I go, oh, she's saying that? oh, I didn't know that, or
Yeah.
I don't
Oh,
know.
and she was the doctor's companion too in one episode. So Doctor Who.
Oops.
Yeah.
Oh, Kylie. Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
Kylie. Yeah.
I want to break
But
in here for a second.
What's that?
Someone in the chat who I've never seen in our chat before, our buddy Mark.
Yeah, Mark
It's like, hi,
Malnikoff.
Mark,
Yeah,
how you doing,
he's
sweetie?
lurking today. Good to see
Yeah.
you, my friend.
I also see
So-
Jesse Guajardo and Maria Tientelli
Yep.
and AJ Boomer.
Yeah.
And,
So-
and Deleted Scenes is geeking out about Debbie Gibson. Don't blame you.
Oh, hey,
Don't
hey!
blame you.
I mean, that's what I mean. Because the thing is, what I'm trying to tackle is I've seen many artists who have probably even not gotten the due they deserve. You know what I mean? So it's like I can respect. I may not be the biggest fill in the blank pop fan. Like I mean, I most of my pop consumption has been Asian pop, and it's not because of the growing up, again, I didn't have a country for old men, so I didn't know what it meant to be an Asian or a Filipino. I just know that I was running around INS building to INS building before I became a citizen. That's all I
Yeah.
remember doing. But the idea that there have been other acts that have done it for longer. Now the question is, who did it better? And I'll try to be as objective. It's going to be tough because, Retro Blasting, the one thing I give him credit for, he does his homework, and so he always lays down the arguments like, yeah, I can totally see it, and and when I was laid off, that was the one that started everything for me, where I learned how to connect the dots within the YouTube world. Like Iconicon was one of those things, and so boom, 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 everyone's connected. So, yep.
That's great. Real. Yep. So yeah. So that's what you got coming up tomorrow night. Tomorrow night over on my channel. I will be and people are gonna groan, but
Much booze will be flowing.
yeah, but blame Agent Boomer for this one. This was his suggestion. So tomorrow is the 45th anniversary of the Star Wars Holiday Special. We've already seen it last week with Michael from Retro Blasting.
Right.
But what I wanted to do was keep the spirit alive, and I felt like we need to for the younger people that didn't grow up in the 70s. Explain the whole idea of the TV variety show. And we're going to do that by watching an episode of the Donnie and Marie show, specifically the one that featured them as Princess Leia and Luke Skywalker in a
he's
Star
already
Wars
made
movie.
me watch
Yeah,
this.
he's already watched it. So that's what tomorrow's going to be on. And yeah, I do recommend front loading. It might not be a bad idea to make sure that you are well and truly lubricated.
Yep.
But let me just type this comment to Deleted Scenes. Carry on, Netter. Take us through the week.
Okay, let's see. So that's Friday.
Yep.
Saturday, we are going to be on Big Al's channel, and I'm drawing a blank on the name of the movie.
Son-in-law.
Son-in-law.
Oh.
So we're going to be watching that on Big Al's channel. Then let's see. Sunday, there's tons of stuff going on. So we're starting off with Deleted Scenes at, is it 7
Yep.
Central?
So delete. Yeah. Okay. I'm done. So I can pick it up. So Deleted Scenes 7 o'clock Central, 8 Eastern. You know what? I can, now that I have it all in
Your pretty little
my
calendar.
MeWe group. Yeah, I can very easily get there and look at it. So here, events. Yes. So let's see. So unscripted with Deleted Scenes. It's episode 40, The End of the Affair. Yeah, he gives us these titles that are little clues to what they're going to be about, but I don't know what it is. Sounds a little clickbaity when you start talking about the end of an affair, but yep, now I want to know. Then, of course, at 8 o'clock Central, 9 Eastern, over on Age of Boomers channel, Geeky Geezers, where we will bring you the week's geeky news, some of which you may have heard about on other channels, but I am sure we will bring you a very different perspective and probably a bunch of stuff you haven't heard about anywhere else because it's interesting to us. And then midnight Eastern, that's about 11 p.m. Central, get back to Deleted Scenes for The Other Side of Midnight. And speaking of deleted scenes, Tuesday, 7:30 Central, 8:30 Eastern, meet us at Sparkwood and 21 as we delve back into the world of Twin Peaks. This week is episode 5, Cooper's Dream. And we start to pick apart what that dream is all about. That brings us around to next Thursday. Netter of Netters Network, what is next? Who is our guest next Thursday?
Well, next Thursday is Thanksgiving.
Oh,
So our
that's
special guest we'll be watching Charlie Brown Thanksgiving.
Yeah, so we're going to be meeting up with Charlie Brown and Sally and Linus and Lucy, and we're going to...
Snoopy and Woodstock.
Yeah, and we're going to... we're gonna revisit the Thanksgiving. It's Thanksgiving, Charlie Brown. Thanksgiving.
I think that's what's called.
Happy Thanksgiving, Charlie Brown. Whatever it is.
Yeah, I think it's Thanksgiving, Charlie Brown.
And
I figure, I mean, normally I would think about like canceling the show, not having anything on, but I also understand there's some people that may not have anything to do that day. They want to hang out, so you can come hang out with us. We don't mind at all. You can watch the Charlie Brown Thanksgiving with us. We will have a Cosme link pinned to the top so you can follow along, as always.
Yep.
And yeah, just join us if you want to, and if nothing else, pop in and say hi. Wish us a happy Thanksgiving. We'll wish you one and carry on.
And that is the week in review. That's all I got, Netter.
Okay. Anything else, Lester?
Well, nothing else from me. I mean, I there are a lot of thought pieces I have in the back of my mind, like my Bruce Lee figure thing. We talk about FOMO being short of, missing out on products we want to buy, but I think of FOMO as I'm losing my opportunity to call out the Bruce Lee store website because I keep going back there and I go, you're peddling this garbage, and it's like, I love my sister to death, but when people take something in good faith, like a figure, like, well, my brother might like this. And I go, yeah, it looks cool, and then I open it and I start working with it, and like, it looks more like E.T. and so that's the thing. It's like I've been slogging on that because I was trying to, because that's the thing about YouTube and things I'm learning about YouTube and things I'm learning about from other people. Like, I think you might know of the Common Nerd Troy. You might. And so hearing about him and then also all things 80s, whatever happened with his story. But he's back. But I know a lot of channels getting like, nope, can't have you do this. And that copyright bot just bugs me to no end.
Yeah.
Like it's like I want to inject some humor, and I don't know if they're gonna call me out because I'm trying to mouth the guy who says, "Is your name Tong Long?"
Yeah, exactly.
I can't. I mean, I would love to snip the scenes out because you talk about owning physical media. Like I've owned a copy of Way of the Dragon. Speaking of that, I'm waiting on my Arrow, and it's been interesting listening to I think it's Midnight Edges and fanzine, with Greg and talking about the different ways people are getting physical media. And so I have my copies. I've had a number of copies of Way of the Dragon, but it's like, yeah, can I not use this? And I know there's that stinking disclaimer, unlawful use. And it's like, well, like for example, my brother, he played Al Green's "Let's Stay Together" on a ukulele at a live venue, and then YouTube says, "Sorry, we gotta flag you," because I don't know if it's a strike, but it's just one of those things where I want to be able to take a scene. Like I'm gonna have to figure that out.
And sure, we
it's-
have a question in the chat. Serenity wants to know, what is Thanksgiving? As an English resident, they don't understand.
Ah,
So I
okay.
will allow you to explain because you're good with words.
Yeah, so it's funny because you ask a dozen people and you'll get a dozen different answers. There is a lot of mythology built up in American history around Thanksgiving, but when the colonies started here in the United States, mostly Puritans, right, that were looking for religious freedom, they had a really hard time, and there was a lot of rough years and a lot of starvation, and it really required a great deal of community, including, I know this is hard to believe given the propaganda we hear all the time, but a lot of community with the locals, the Native Americans. And there is a great story about Mild Standish and the so-called first Thanksgiving where they pulled in a harvest, and it was going to be a rough year, and they were going to have a big feast, and a bunch of natives showed up and said, "Oh, you're having a feast? Well, we'll join you, and we'll bring all these deer that we killed, and we'll share that with you." And it just became like a big potluck, really. And all the foods that they ate were probably very different than the foods we eat here in the United States now. But it's basically a feast day specifically set aside for giving thanks. And actually, I have a very interesting video on my sister channel, the Klingon Cleric, talking about a Klingon holiday built on the premise that there are certain concepts that are universal. And if you live on a planet that has seasons, a cold season and a warm season in the north and southern hemisphere, then you know that you have a growing season. And at the end of that growing season, you better harvest and set aside to get through the cold season, which is usually shorter periods of daylight, so a lot of dark. So there's a lot of mythology that comes out of those dark times. You'll hear about the scary ghost stories of Christmases long, long ago.
yeah.
Well, there's a reason people tell scary stories, in the winter months, and it's also why people tend to come together in community to get through those cold, lean months because of having worked all year and put aside. And so basically what it comes down to is it's literally a day set aside to be thankful for what we have and prepare for and look forward to the winter months and getting through them together. That's why we come together with family, community, and so forth. And that's why Netter didn't want to cancel the stream for next week. If you are going to be celebrating Thanksgiving or any other holiday, really, if you're doing something, you're going to be away from your computer, that's fine, okay? One of the great things about YouTube live streams is after they're live, they're still there to be watched later, live in Memorex, right? For those of you old enough to know what that means.
But I figure if y'all don't have anything to do and you want to hang out, stop on by. We'll watch
Exactly.
the Charlie Brown Thanksgiving special together and just hang out.
Because the
always.
fact is, Netter and I would be watching it anyway. We
Yeah.
want to share it with you.
and
Come
we're
together
just
in
gonna be
community.
hanging out together. So
Yeah.
because we don't have family coming over or anything like that. His family's in Ohio. I got family scattered.
Yeah.
So it's just the two of us. So we're gonna be watching anyway. So stop on by if you want
And right.
enjoy
And
us.
all of y'all that are Canadians, you guys get the Thanksgiving thing. You just celebrated a week earlier or a week later.
It's
Something like
probably they do it in October.
Oh, do they? Okay.
Yeah.
Either way, you get
Yeah.
the idea. You get
Yep.
the idea.
Yeah. Yep.
I don't
So,
know. I'm French Canadian and I have no idea about any of the Canadian holidays.
we'll blame your dad for that.
We all wrap it up. Y'all know what I always
Yes.
say at the end of every stream. We can talk amongst ourselves, and that's all well, good, and fun. But it is so much more fun when you guys are joining us in the chat, and you're dropping your comments, questions, trivia, being goofy, whatever it may be. And it doesn't feel like we're separated by miles or continents in some cases. it feels like we're all hanging out in the same room, enjoying each other's company and having a great time, which hopefully we'll be doing on Thanksgiving too.
Yeah.
And you guys aren't just our friends. You are our family. We love you guys and we appreciate you so very much. You can be anywhere right now and you choose to be here. And that is so super encouraging. So thank you all so very much for being here. Remember to subscribe to everyone on the panel, everyone in the chat. If you think you are already subbed to somebody, double check because YouTube sucks and likes to take away subs.
Yeah.
And remember, together we grow, and that's part of what Thursday Things is about. You come on my channel, we talk about your channel, we talk about you, we help to grow your channel, because together we grow. PJ from Orbital Nation's always saying that.
Yeah.
And I also want to thank everyone again for all your prayers and well wishes for while I was ill. You can hear in my voice, I am definitely
I can
on
hear
the
your
mend.
voice.
Yeah,
That
you
is
can
Yeah.
hear my voice.
Yeah.
I'm definitely on the mend. I've got a couple of days of antibiotics left, but it's like I am doing infinitely better. So thank you again for all your prayers and well wishes and good thoughts and all that. I really appreciate it. And then on that happy note, we'll definitely see you next time. Have a great night, everyone. Bye now.